Brian Meltzer reporting there. Now, for more insight on the ASEAN summit and regional cooperation, let's bring in political and economic affairs commentator Einar Tangen. Always good to have you on, Einar.
Good to be here, Rochelle.
So first, let me get your overall impressions from this week's summit in terms of what was accomplished and what remains outstanding or requires further discussion.
Well, quite frankly, this was a story about balance. As Nathan King was saying, ASEAN does not want to be forced to choose between the U.S. and China, and they're going to try to work with both of them. What you saw was they granted comprehensive strategic partnership status to Australia, which is a nod to the U.S., also, diffusing this AUKUS row. But in November, it's anticipated that there will be a meeting and an announcement by China that it's also going to upgrade its status. That will leave the U.S. in a secondary position as just a strategic partner. And also, there was, this $100 million buy-in. A lot of it is kind of repurposed monies. But it seems like Biden is trying to reassure ASEAN that the U.S. is a reliable partner, even if it does not appear that way. COVID was not enough front and center. There's a lot of issues there, and we will have to see what actually happens as they go forward.
So let's break some of that down. As you mentioned, U.S. President Biden pledging $100 million in an effort to build relationships with Southeast Asian countries. Do we know how that money will be used?
Well, Rochelle, it's interesting. About 40 million of it is just under an existing program, it's a health program that's been in existence for 20 years. It's not exactly new money. It's just a repledge of what they were doing prior. And some of it is just loans. So there was not a lot of new money. Missing was a real solid commitment to the pandemic, COVID, vaccines, et cetera, and a real economic component. I mean, this is a massive area. It's China's #1 trade partner, and the U.S. is really kind of lagging behind. So this was not a, it's more theatrics than reality. And it will not be regarded as, as a massive new initiative by the countries in ASEAN.
So then what kind of relationship does the U.S. want to have with ASEAN countries now?
Well, it seems that they're moving this theater. I mean, they're talking about the Indo-Pacific. This is not going to be a welcome idea. After the victories in Afghanistan and the Middle East, et cetera, ASEAN is very wary of the United States bringing its kind of circus tent of conflict into their area. Already in Myanmar, the U.S. government is contacting, quote, a shadow government there in attempts to assure them that they have support. ASEAN, excluded Myanmar over their inability to follow through with a peace plan. But that's an internal matter, and it's all about consensus within their group. They're not going to be very happy if the U.S. wants to encourage armed conflict within their midst.
And as you mentioned, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged to meet with ASEAN leaders sometime in November. Talk about the importance of that meeting and any expectations there.
Well, it's massive. I mean, China's been involved for 30 years. ASEAN is the #1 trade partner. Moving up to the top level of the strategic comprehensive partnership is very, very important. It plays into the Belt and Road Initiative. Many of the countries there are involved in that, and also on the RCEP. So you see China marching ahead, solidifying its economic position, offering trade and investment in countries that badly need it. And, noticeable was this, remark that was made acknowledging that China has been the overwhelming helpful partner in terms of dealing with COVID-19, especially the vaccines.
And to that point then, where do ASEAN countries stand in terms of vaccine equity with things like COVAX and trying to suppress COVID-19 while still rebuilding their economies?
Well, it's very difficult. There's a sharp division between countries that have hundreds of cases per day versus thousands. I mean, if you look at the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, these are all countries that are really suffering right now. And the rest of them are still there. I mean, they're still having concerns, and the concerns about additional waves coming in. They're doing the best they can, but there's been no substantive relief being offered by the U.S. It's mostly been coming from China, and this is going to weigh very heavily on what they plan to do in terms of COVAX and things like that. Everybody, I think Brunei just recently joined, so everybody is expecting something, but there isn't a lot of tremendous movement, and you didn't really hear a double down by Biden in terms of supporting it or making assurances that the kind of billions of doses that are needed will eventually get there. Right now, most of the countries are planning to do what they can with what they can get. It's all about supplies, intellectual property, and getting these vaccines made and injected into people.
Indeed. Well, thank you as always. Einar Tangen there, political and economic affairs commentator.